sixth-generation beautiful farm in Southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pastures beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Come to the forest. It's a place not so far away where you don't have to mow the lawn or babysit. Ask your parents to take you to where the other you lives. But first, stop by discovertheforest.org, brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
This portion of the upcoming amazing broadcast is brought to you by the law firm of Catania & Catania, award-winning personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Granosky. Welcome back to the program. So glad to have you all for hour 2 of our program. And it's great to have this time together to look at the news like we always do, neighbor to neighbor, not relying on tribalism, groupthink, and all that boring stuff. We want the truth. That means we're going to have to cut against the grain of sacred cows and find the truth wherever it goes. Amishi, listener online, asks, many who study Rene Girard look at the scapegoat mechanism as something that is problematic or in need of fixing or a way to frame problems. Is it possible that perhaps the lesson of Girard is not in the scapegoat, but that learning by imitation, mimesis, a cheap learning, if I think about it, the fake it till you make it method does not work? In my journey from novice to master, I found recipes that worked for the task of a novice never suffice for the complexity and efficiency of the work a master needs to do. Well, one thing I'd say about that is that if you are blindly imitating, it will lead to a lot of conflict when it comes into social problems and social, coherence and getting along in society. What innovation is about is being able to combine different skill sets you learn through imitation in a unique combination. You see, that's what real innovation is. The creativity that's engaged for people who really innovate and change the game in their field of expertise is found when you are able to be aware of how much you imitate and then to, consciously combine and connect the dots. So you take something from this person, that person, this person, that person, and that combination of what you bring together with a new insight is where you get true innovation. It is knowing how to wisely and consciously combine different patterns of knowledge and things you've picked up along the way from different sources into a new combination. So a lot of people imitate Shakespeare, right? And a lot of people imitate, Nikola Tesla, right? What if you combine those two together? See what I mean? It's about learning how to combine true mastery of different skill sets and different things and stack those things. That's what Scott Adams calls it, talent stack. That's another way to look at it. You're stacking talents and stacking the imitation of different things, but not in a way that becomes just a rote imitation. I think of a company, this is what happens with a lot of founders, is they create a company because they're a little different, they're a little bit different. They're easy to be scapegoated. They're a little bit extreme in some things, personality quirks, whatever. And they create a really successful company. And then when they die, people get in there and they say, how do we imitate what so-and-so did? And that's not what the founder did, right? The founder didn't sit back and say, how do I just do what everybody else, what this guy who's already established did? So they're not learning how to truly imitate the founder. If they knew how to imitate the founder, they would say, wait a second, he combined different great things he learned from this source and that source and this source, and he combined them together in a new kind of combination, which allowed him to create the innovations that we now enjoy today after all this time. So how do we look at the big picture and find out a pattern and combination together of what different people are doing here and there, even outside of our own industry, and pull it together for a new picture? Instead, they just say, well, what would that guy do? Well, that guy wouldn't do the thing of saying, well, what would that guy do? But they don't, that's the fake. And that's how so much of people operate. It's a very flimsy, postcard imitation. Everybody wants to put Tesla's name on their brand, but do they actually live up to the shoes of a Tesla? Are they just trying to coast on the branding, right? Instead of actually living up to the spirit. And it's the same thing goes on to, people who sacralize the founding fathers. What would the founding fathers do? Well, that's fine. And that's true when it comes to following a constitutional republic. If the law says this is what it is, then yeah, you don't want to do in the spirit of the law stuff, because then you'll gut the foundations of the moral basis that they're trying to put in there. Like say, hey, you're not allowed to have the federal government arrest people or stop them for speaking or assembling or having their religion. But on a deeper level, we have to also not be kind of a reactionary where we're always saying, well, what would the founders do now, as opposed to, well, how could we take the best of what the founders thought about, but actually go farther towards liberty, farther towards prosperity and peace and nonviolence and decentralization? How do we go beyond that, as opposed to just only trying to catch a little glimpse of or take a little piece of what they had in a rote imitation way? We need to learn how to combine it with other information. The founders didn't understand anthropology like we now have the ability to see. So how can we learn from the founders, but also take what we now learn and expand that into better and broader defenses for liberty and the human person? I saw this post here going back to kind of where the problem is today. Candace Owens posted something that reminded me of what we talk about when it comes to anthropology on this program. She said, it's pretty incredible to consider that right now governments are like, quote, in order to keep you safe, we need to impoverish you, imprison you, force mask and vaccinate you, plus separate you from your family. And there are millions out there that are just like, okay. And we know that that's what human nature has always been like. People just go along. And we live in this fantasy that makes us believe that we come to our opinions because of rational consideration. We don't. We have these desires and passions, and then afterwards we kind of come up with rationalizations for why we feel a certain way about something. And a lot of people want to go along, and they want to sacrifice. They feel like if I sacrifice a little bit, that, as Van Morrison said in the earlier tweet in hour one of our broadcast today, the people who most persist in wanting lockdowns usually have been the ones that have had the least impact on their paycheck. But at the same time, there is a little bit of that feeling of sacrifice that folks want to make. Like, well, let's keep on complying with all this stuff, because in my obedience, I am sacrificing my individual autonomy to this larger great reset, this transcendent other. But it's not going to last. It won't bind them together. It won't create cohesion. It won't create unity, because it's not real. It's not based on anything real. What's real is what Jesus revealed on the cross. That's real. What's real is what human beings do to create fake illusions of authority. That if enough people say something's okay, it becomes okay. We saw earlier today a video clip of a mother in South Florida at a library, public library, with her little toddler, and they were reading books together in a library. And you see this police officer woman telling her, you must leave. And you see her, she's got the gun at her side. She hasn't drawn it. But the point is she's saying, you must leave now. You have created a disturbance. And again, I don't know all the facts of the case, But I do think there's something fundamentally wrong with a society that sends in a human being armed with a gun with the option of deadly force with qualified immunity to escort a woman out of a public library with her toddler because she's not wearing a mask. Call me weird for thinking that that is a very disturbing and horrific indictment on a society that has lost its Christian love. That you send in both situations. Why are you sending in a woman with a gun with qualified immunity to and the right to have deadly force to tell a woman to leave a public library because she's not wearing a mask? A young woman with a young toddler as they're reading books together. Everything we are as a people is being squandered here in that moment. This is the ugly reality of a sacrificial system that has lost any foundation in reality. It is only a bystander effect that allows something like that to even happen for one moment. That everybody along the way in the decision-making process has no skin in the game, and therefore they don't care what they do. They don't even see what they do. They don't even know what they do. Because there's all this lack of skin in the game. There's all this lack of accountability from the people that make these mandates that have no basis in legal reality, not legislated. They're just these little mandates oftentimes. To the people who enforce these things, to the people who call people with, think about that. Think about how pathetic it is to call in a person with the immunity, legal immunity, to use deadly force and have the armed to do so, to confront a young mom and her toddler for reading books without a mask. We just showed, if you were listening to the hour before this broadcast, we just showed, you can go back and see it on neighborschoice.com, we just showed that the Wuhan study in Nature Communication showed 10 million people they studied and not one case of an asymptomatic spread. If a young woman can go into and take groupthink, that they would send in a woman and with immunity to go and confront a mother and say, you must leave now. Because why? There's no science. 10 million people studied scientifically in Wuhan, China, and there were no cases, not one case of an asymptomatic spread among people. This woman obviously is in the library without symptoms. That's why they check these places. But that is somehow, think about how shrunken as a human being you have to be to call a person with a legal right to use a gun with immunity to confront a young mom with her little toddler, the precious thing of a young mom reading children's books to her toddler. And you are so shrunken in your humanity. And then you wonder why Jesus tells the story of human beings blindly crucifying people and not knowing what they do. This is humanity revealed in the story of the cross. And you're seeing it on display in moments like this all around you. What kind of brain is so shrunken in responsibility and human love that they know not what they do, that they would call a woman with deadly force, with immunity to use that force, to force and physically remove a young mom from a library with her little toddler as they read children's books together because they don't have a mask on. 10 million people scientifically studied in Wuhan, China, don't have a single asymptomatic spread documented. But these Luddites want violence so much, they worship sacrifice so much, that they stupidly send in legal deadly force to a young mom and her toddler because they don't have a mask on, because they don't have any symptoms of the virus. This is not science. It is superstition. It is religion. It is the old-time religion that human beings have been using around the world to control other people when they're scared, when they want power and control in the face of uncertainty, when they want belonging and meaning when they don't know where to get it. This is what it looks like. Blind, sacrificial violence, sending in someone with lethal force. And it's not just now. We see this all the time, but this crisis heightens and shows that. It's the same people that send in police to get a little girl to stop her lemonade stand. The same kind of it's mind numbing. It's not just some people. It's what human beings do when they rebel against the love of God. That's what they do when they refuse to love their neighbor as theirself. It looks like this horrible, nihilistic situation of a young mom having police sent to her as she reads children's books. She's not hurting anybody. No one's around her. People are just blindly scared and they want to hurt people. They have the sadistic side to them that is manifested by bypassing it and sending off the responsibility to a police officer to channel their little rage onto a neighbor. It's pathetic. It's superstitious. It's disgusting troglodyte behavior. We'll be back in just a moment. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
Do you despise lawyers? That may be the case until you need one. If you've been in an accident and need legal advice, go to the local attorneys that have served Tampa Bay families for over 28 years. Catania and Catania. They are family owned. They understand your needs with legal advice. When you need legal representation, Catania will care for your case from the beginning to final settlement. You won't need to worry. Catania will represent you throughout the entire process. Auto and motorcycle accidents are too frequent in Florida. If you've been a victim, contact Catania. They don't get paid if you don't get paid. Referrals on request. Contact Catania. Putting families first.
Offices Tampa, non-attorney spokesperson.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski. We're continuing to look at the stories here of the news that is pressing in the minds of people. But first, I want to take a moment to give a shout out to our friends at Oakley Transport. OakleyTransport.com is their website. That's OakleyTransport.com, where they make a big priority to keep America fed. And that means they need drivers. Perhaps you're one of them, or you know someone who is an excellent driver. Maybe they're CDLA certified, and they're willing and ready to take on the call to keep America fed. at oakleytransport.com, where they're looking for drivers who are ready to hit the road to make sure the stores stay stocked with the food people rely on and care about. So go to oakleytransport.com, let them know that a Neighbor's Choice sent you. And that's where you can begin your adventure at Oakley Transport. They take care of their drivers. They have great opportunities to incentivize safe driving with the latest technology monitoring safe driving. So if you have a call to hit the road, then you want to go to oakleytransport.com and let them know a Neighbor's Choice sent you. So I think this is an exciting time to see the reality, friends, of where all of these little rituals and little rites of passage that government is always creating, where they all come from. And they come from our history. They come from thousands of years of human beings finding these little patterns of rituals and rites and liturgies to establish order. And it's all about creating in-crowd and out-crowd. It's all about creating a profane group and a sacred group. And the sacred group are those who obey the hierarchy, those who obey and follow the rites of passage. They follow the rituals, and they speak the right speech codes, and they do all the right things, and they get to be considered part of the sacred crowd. And people like that feeling. Saying you're part of the sacred crowd is the same way of what people say today of saying, want to be cool, right? I just want to be cool. Nobody ever admits that they do things because they want to be cool. But that word that concept of wanting to be cool is striking at the core of that deeper sense of human beings wanting to belong, wanting to feel better or arrive, that they're cool, they're edgy, they're different, whatever, but they're part of the cool crowd. That sacred space is where folks want to be. And then today's society, that which was considered profane has now become the new sacred, the new cool, right? And there's an attempt to try to make everybody who wants to have family-friendly values and peace and nonviolence and no war and respect for private property, respect for liberty, respect for diversity of thought, that's now considered profane. And that's where the new normal is headed. I saw this headline here, just illustrates this. This is in the postmillennial.com. It says, father who raped own child will receive taxpayer funding for gender transition and move to women's prison. So Campbell is this person has received taxpayer funding, hormone, and counseling since being incarcerated. In 2013, 6 years into the prison term, Campbell requested gender confirmation surgery. So this is what it looks like to have a crisis of undifferentiation, in which you are working hard to put food on the table, but you have to have your money confiscated by the state, and then they use it to transition people who do horrible things, and then you got to house them for years and years and provide them with all these benefits. Why? Because that's the new sacred. That's the new sacred. They don't want anybody to feel marginalized or excluded on an identity marker standing point. Therefore, they will do ridiculous things like confiscate wealth and give it to people for this or that, and reward someone with your money that they can have these gender transitions or go to these different things, even though they've done violent things. They get this kind of treatment. It's a very bizarre world. But it's only explained in light of the cross, in light of what Jesus did to break down old hierarchies of sacrifice. And now we're in the middle of that, and we're floundering. We are swimming around looking for answers, looking for meaning, looking for boundaries and something bigger to get behind, bigger than our own lives. And that's where all these ideologies pop up. That's where the McWoke stuff pops up. That's where all these giant corporations come up with these little fake commercialized versions of Christianity that always fail to provide what the real thing only can provide, which is forgiveness, release from sin, repentance, mercy, reconciliation, and restoration of both the oppressed and the oppressor. In the McWoke religion, there is nothing but hell and torture for anybody who is considered an oppressor or a friend of an oppressor. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
Ronald Reagan would turn over in his grave if he saw what's going on today.
Crazy things are happening.
You cannot be afraid. You've got to stand up for what you believe is right.
But one thing is for sure.
You can't trust anybody.
For talk, news, and information, you can count on us.
Enough is enough. I mean, I almost blew a gasket.
Good for the country.
I know what I'm talking about. A lot of wackos out there.
Your connection to talk about it. The all-new News Talk 1040, WHPO.
President-elect Biden received the first dose of his coronavirus vaccine today. He thanked the scientists, the healthcare workers, and the Trump administration.
The administration deserves some credit getting this off the ground with Operation Warp Speed.
Mr. Biden was inoculated the same day a second vaccine produced by Moderna began arriving in the U.S.
Moderna vaccine has arrived, and that is indeed good news. 672,600 to be exact is what we anticipate receiving this week. The 110,000 we already have.
That's California Governor Gavin Newsom, who says it's likely the state's stay-at-home orders will be extended. He is staying at home, quarantining for the second time in 2 months after one of his staffers tested positive for the virus. More nations are restricting travel from Great Britain over worries about a new variant of COVID-19. The House is expected to vote soon, and the Senate late tonight on a $900 billion coronavirus relief bill and a longer-term spending bill. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
I'm Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm your host, David Gronowski. You can email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. That's hello@aneighborschoice.com. Always love hearing from our listeners around the world and around the state of Florida on our FM and AM affiliate stations as we grow in multimedia efforts, as we build our own infrastructure to have a conversation where we can challenge toxic groupthink. And here's a story that demonstrates that in the state media PR firm, Washington Post, which is a PR firm for whatever big government and big business wants you to know. It says $900 billion stimulus is second biggest in U.S. history, but it won't last long enough. The biggest concern with the bill is that the aid doesn't last long enough. And this is a story that says economists and policymakers expressed relief as Congress announced a deal Sunday on a $900 billion stimulus package to aid the rapidly deteriorating economy, but the smaller size of the legislation, the omission of several key provisions, and the fact that some of the aid expires in March left analysts warning that more spending may be needed next year. As the coronavirus has worsened, so has the economic outlook. Retail sales are sagging. Small business closures are the worst in 6 months. Unemployment applications just hit a 4-month high. Manufacturing is slowing down, and hunger, especially among families with kids, is at the highest point in this recession. Companies such as Disney and Southwest Airlines are warning of thousands more layoffs, and gyms such as InShape and retailers such as Francesca's file for bankruptcy. And so this article says, this latest bipartisan relief package omits direct state and local aid, and it only extends federal unemployment benefits to mid-March, even though millions of people probably will be out of work for far longer. Overall, the bill's price tag shrank from $2 trillion to below $1 trillion, a product of legislative compromise that was forged between Democrats and Republicans who were weary of adding to the nation's debt load. So they want to give you a little $600 check for everybody, printed out of thin air. They wanted way more, but remember, the money that they want, 90% of it or more goes to all the special interests, and not to you. It's all bad. It's all bad. You don't create money by, printing money out of thin air. That doesn't create wealth. And at the same time, you're not able to expand the money supply without having inflation cause prices to increase. And that's what we're going to eventually see. We're going to see a dollar crisis loom ever so viciously onto the American people. And no one talks about that. No one talks about the reality of creating money out of thin air. They just do it every time. But always they give you crumbs. You notice? That's why I call it corporate communism. That's what both parties are devoted to doing. That is corporate profits coddled together through bailouts and rigged regulations for their friends that they represent. And the Republicans have some favorite corporations and the Democrats have other favorite corporations, but they all work together to get, all right, I need to get this for my people and you need to get this for your people. So let's settle on, all right, I'll take $10 off of this $1 billion for this company and you take $10 off for yours. We'll call it a day. Oh yeah, the people, throw them some crumbs. What do they need? $600. Go throw it. Throw them $600. And people just, they say, well, I want 2,000. I mean, it's pathetic, right? And it's sad. And it's a mixed feeling, right? Because you understand that people have had their lives forcibly destroyed because of anti-science policies. The study showed 10 million people scientifically studied, not one asymptomatic case. And yet people have to ban outdoor dining in California and attack mothers with kids reading a book in a public library and shut down businesses in New York who are not part of the club of giant corporations that get to be open no matter what. So it is a transfer of wealth. It is an attack against people's small businesses. It's a consolidation of markets. And so people who are in severe pain, it's right for them to want to have more direct aid than that since all the big corporations get it. But unfortunately, they're not a priority for both parties. Both parties have bigger priorities. They were put in there with bigger paychecks from bigger, more powerful lobbying groups, and they do not care about average people. Neither party really cares. They care about extracting wealth for their friends and the industries that they represent and the government agencies that they represent. And then they have to come up with some scraps to throw on the ground for the average person to take up. Apparently $600 is a little bit of a lean scrap. If they had given you a morsel of, say, 2,000, would that have satisfied? Maybe 4,000 a person, 5,000, 10,000. How big of a scrap would they have to throw on the ground for us to be happy? At the end of the day, whatever the size of the scrap is, and no matter how much you want to, justify it in the short term, the long term is this will continue to attack and undermine the prosperity of the people. Because as we've described before, new money, and again, they're giving you a tiny piece of this $900 billion package. Most of it's going to go to all the favored banks and corporations and agencies that get the new money first. But by the time the rest of that $900 billion spending deal floods out to the rest of the economy, it will go and it will cause prices to increase. It will cause a transfer of wealth from those who got the money first to those who get the money later. And that will hurt people who are on fixed incomes like seniors. It will hurt people on middle incomes. And it will be a real terrible tragedy for folks who, first of all, the lockdowns based on no science, based on false science, cripple their business. Then after the business is crippled, they get a few scraps thrown at them on the ground. And then, to add insult to injury, all that new credit that was created to pay for those scraps, but more importantly, the giant bailouts for corporations and governments, eventually that money floods and distorts and destroys their savings. So not only was their business, their family's business destroyed, but then the newly created money that was supposed to be the fix, the stimulus, ends up destroying those people's savings and purchasing power after their business has been destroyed. You want to talk about a heck of a punch. That's what government does. They punch and destroy real hardworking families. They cripple people's health care. They crippled people's immune system with our garbage food pyramid. And they've continued to be a disaster at every step of the way where it counts, which are the things that that matter to us most. So it's a very disappointing thing to see. So what do you do when you see that? It's a hard place to be, because on one hand, I sympathize with people who want a bigger check. If we're going to be thrown scraps and you're desperate to pay your bills, Getting $600 does feel like an insult. At the same time, I know where that money is going to lead. It's going to lead to the transfer of wealth through the loss of purchasing power and the loss of savings value. And that is going to be a real horrible thing that adds monstrous insult upon insult after what they've already done to cripple small businesses and brick and mortar stores with this overreaction to something that could be handled with proper nutrition and proper education of vitamin D and some careful consideration for those who are most vulnerable to this new virus. So you don't get that, though. You don't get nuance. You don't get intelligence. You don't get education when you deal with these one-size-fits-all policies. You get hysteria, you get ego, you get narcissism, you get arrogance, and you get theft. That's what you get when you go to government for answers like this. If you ask government what to do about cancer, they're not going to tell you about the work of cutting-edge pioneers like Dr. Thomas Seyfried, who I've had on my program. He's from Boston College, where he's showing that it's the mitochondria and the metabolic system that needs to be approached for cancer, not genetic, not chemo, surgery, and radiation, but rather using therapeutic ketosis, which could be the new pathway for a revolutionary paradigm in cancer treatment. You don't get that when you ask government about cancer, and neither will you get the truth about what to do about diabetes. They won't tell you the truth about that. They won't tell you how to get rid of vegetable oils and sugar and processed flour. They don't tell you that. They just say, take this medicine and be quiet. They don't tell you that you can actually heal these things using changes to your diet and changes to your pattern of lifestyle. So what makes you think they're going to have the brilliant cutting edge information for how to deal with a new virus? And what makes you think for a moment that they'll have the answers for how to deal with your poverty caused by their lockdowns? They don't have the answers. It is only a religious faith in these institutions that makes people persist in the delusion that they do have answers. They simply don't. They won't ever have answers no matter who you elect. And that's why it's a good thing for those who love liberty and those who call themselves champions of the Constitution or whatever, this coalition of different people who don't go along with the lockdowns and so forth. That's why it's good that they have to wake up to the reality that elections don't really give them the results that they believe. It's good that they're losing faith in the idea that their problems can be solved through elections. It's time for us to look closer to home. It's time for us to get closer to decentralizing power back to the local, moving away from trying to resolve our problems and disputes at a central command center in a city that is surrounded by an impenetrable wall of special interests. Those special interests do not include your well-being. They do not include your health. They do not include your family's well-being. They have their own interests, and their interests are to extract your wealth using the loot that's extracted from the federal government. And it comes in the form of taxation. It comes in the form of regulation and lockdowns and mandates. And it comes in the form of inflation and credit creation with the Federal Reserve. But no matter how it comes, it destroys your family's future, your family's wealth, your family's savings. And don't let anybody tell you that they're socially just in promoting such things, because that is the biggest lie you could imagine, is that somehow this is a just thing to print money to the tune of trillions every year, throw scraps to the little person, and all of it, at the end of the day, will debase the little person's savings and their purchasing power. And that's what we're dealing with today. We don't have an honest media that tells you this. We have a media that does everything to be a PR firm for the people who benefit from this extraction economy. But it's an economy that does not serve your family's interests. It does not serve your liberty's interests. It does not serve your grandchildren's interests to persist in such a bloated bureaucracy. We have to change. We have to repent of this empire. This empire is sick. This empire needs to be downsized. This empire has gone too far in its abuse of the human person, because the human person can never be forgotten in any of this. And yet that's exactly what we're doing every day. I mean, look at this story here to give you an example of that. Vatican says use of COVID vaccines made from aborted fetal tissue is ethical. This is by Reuters. The Vatican told Roman Catholics on Monday that it was morally acceptable for them to use COVID-19 vaccines, even if their production is employed even if their production employed cell lines drawn from tissues of aborted fetuses. A note from the Vatican's doctrinal congregation, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, said the use of such vaccines was permitted as long as there were no alternatives. So that is an example. You're supposed to go to the house of God. You're supposed to go to the house of Jesus and find that God desires mercy, not sacrifice. But somehow they've lost their way so much that they're okay with, the ethics of using human bodies, tissues, to create a drug. I mean, that's as sacrificial as you can get. I mean, literally, that's what societies did. I mean, the whole purpose of the Vatican is supposed to exist as a different agent in history from the pagan societies that came before it. Isn't that the whole purpose? Isn't that why Peter died upside down? To renounce the sacrifice that societies had used? Isn't that why Jesus said, "It is finished"? What was finished? The way in which societies would sacrifice the vulnerable, including children, for the antidote to chaos. Isn't that what the Vatican is endorsing here? To use a solution that comes from extracting the cells from babies that have been killed. They should not have been killed. They were murdered. They should not have been murdered. And yet their bodies are then used as the basis for a medicine. What is the purpose of the house of Jesus if not to denounce blatant forms of sacrifice like this? To say that it's better that one should die than the whole nation perish? As if the Vatican knows? What does the Vatican know about the immune system? What does the Vatican know about vitamin D3? What does the Vatican teach about vegetable oils? Why doesn't the Vatican talk about vegetable oils? Why doesn't the Vatican talk about the fact that the seed oils that are being put into so much of the food that people eat are the things that cause these horrible, life-threatening comorbidities associated with the risk of dying from this disease? Isn't that a pro-life approach? How much good could happen in the world if Pope Francis stopped coddling corporate fascist governments for once and started saying, "Hey, let me tell you about the vegetable oil"? Could you talk about that for one moment, Pope Francis? Or is that not violent enough for you to tell people to stop eating vegetable oils? Could you do that? You're sitting in the house, you're supposed to be representing Jesus, and you're shoving people into vaccines with human tissue in it, but you can't tell people to lay off vegetable oils? Mamma mia. There's the Vatican for you. We'll be back with more on A Neighbor's Choice after these short messages. Hello, this is David Kronosky with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. David Granosky here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals, join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
Here's one thing you can scratch off your to-do list without going anywhere, without any out-of-pocket cost to you, and even get up to $150 cash back. Get that crack in your windshield fixed by calling Auto Glass America. They'll come to you, and with comprehensive insurance coverage, there's no cost to you. Call Auto Glass America now and fix that pane in the glass with premium glass and a lifetime warranty. Call 813-96-GLASS, 813-96-GLASS. Auto Glass America.
Some law firms advertise that they are the largest. In law, largest is not always best. In fact, your case could get lost in the shuffle with one of those very large law firms. Catania are family-owned. They are Tampa Bay's attorneys representing clients who have experienced auto and motorcycle accidents. Your case will need a local attorney to get a settlement in your favor. Catania, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years. Referrals on request. Get the local law firm to represent you. They don't get paid if you don't get paid. Catania, putting families first.
Car accident, motorcycle accident? Call the local attorneys today. Catania, offices Tampa. Not attorney spokesperson.
I'm Neighbor's Choice is live. I'm David Gronowski. So glad to have you here. Remember, you can go to our website, aneighborschoice.com, to watch any of our episodes that you miss. Also, our online-only podcast, Things Hidden, can be found on aneighborschoice.com. So you want to check it out, bookmark it, because aneighborschoice.com has all the content you're looking for, including our essays that you can find there. Very good stuff. So we're battling a moment of despair, a moment of people surrendering to the false song of fear. And it's something that is a time of people to relearn courage, to relearn what is all about, what life is all about. It's about loving others. It's about serving others. And that requires skin in the game, not being a part of some bureaucracy that can mandate things without consequence, without knowledge. I mean, it's just insane. You can say it over and over again, but these people are trying to mandate masks when there's the scientific papers come out, like in Wuhan, where they studied 10 million people, not one asymptomatic spread found. The science is on the side of liberty. The science is on the side of those who understand the immune system. That you got Nancy Pelosi like a goofball sitting in the middle of Congress with a mask on. There's nobody around her. There's nobody around her. I mean, maybe I'm mistaken, but I didn't see anybody around her as she's doing. She's got her mask on like a clown. These people are here to give the appearances of righteousness, but everything they offer is lies and deception for rich corporations and big, giant government bureaucracies. Meanwhile, you get people like Rand Paul, who are the few people who actually say anything truthful up in D.C., and they get constant hate. And, you know, if you want to see how violent the normal left, the average neoliberal person is, they are constantly talking about how excited they were that Rand Paul was viciously attacked by his deranged left-wing neighbor. That's all they talk about whenever he says, hey, it's okay for kids to go back to school. You'll see all these hateful people on social media just saying, I hope that neighbor hits you again. I love that neighbor. Sick. They worship death. How can you be so violent? I don't think about liberals or neoliberals or corporate fascists like them in that way. I don't think, oh man, I want them to be tackled and hurt by their neighbor. Why are they so freaking awful and disgusting? Now, it doesn't mean they're the only ones. It just means that they're the only ideology which has gotten a complete giant hegemonic media pushing and shoving and normalizing that kind of hateful behavior. Because if you don't get on their little programming, their anti-science programming, they want to spew you out. They want to destroy you. But this story is published by Breitbart.com. It says Rand Paul says masks are all about submission. And And he says it's basically all about, submission rather than actual based in science. He said it'd be one thing if we were told you have to give up your liberty, you have to give up your freedom, we're going to save your life. But what if you have to give up all your freedoms and they're wrong on the science? Every one of the mandates, and you look in country after country, state after state, you look at when the mask mandates went in, the incidents went up exponentially after the mandates. Restaurants, nobody can eat in a restaurant. There's no science behind any of that. Middle seat missing on the airplane. You really think you're like 12 inches from the other guy instead of 6 inches? It really makes a difference? None of it really makes any sense. And there's no epidemiological evidence. It's like wash your hands, stand 6 feet apart. There's no evidence that slowed down the spread. The trajectory of the virus hasn't been altered at all by any of these things. I think the vaccine, and this is why I really despise people like CNN Dr. Gupta, who I think is committing television malpractice by saying, oh, your mask is a much better thing than the vaccine. Well, no, it isn't. The masks aren't working at all. The thing's going through the roof and people are dying. Why would you want to discourage someone from taking a vaccine and say, or wear the mask? And the masks are different too. The N95 mask actually does work to a certain extent if worn properly and used with sterile technique. In the hospital, our doctors, I have a brother and sister who are doctors, they wear the N95 mask and it's kept them from getting infected. But there's no value to the cloth mask at all. It's like wearing your underwear. You might as well cut your underwear up and wear your underwear as protection. It doesn't work. And so, that's what we need to think about. He said, if Fauci had his way, you'll never give up on the mask, warned Dr. Paul. It's all about submission. They want you to submit to their will, whether there's any science. In fact, like on schools, I've been telling Fauci for 6 months, the evidence is that if you open schools, you will not get a surge. The whole world accepts it, except Dr. Fauci. He finally accepted it last week, 6 months after I started showing him the evidence. So that's the thing. We have, a lot of facts that have emerged to reinforce common sense, which is you don't brutally destroy people's lives in a hysteria, and you don't force things which don't have any basis in science, and you don't spend all your time scaring people into blind, sitting in the house for every day, not having Christmas, not having Thanksgiving. All of this stuff is so intrusive that it is unbearable to think about if we don't have a kind of transition in where we reject all of this. I have a feeling, though, that they're not going to get away from these kind of nanny state regulations and interventions as long as they possibly can get away with it. They're going to keep this thing going as much as they can, and more excuses every day to try to justify their presence in extracting wealth for their friends. Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But not so with the busybody. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. That's C.S. Lewis. And that's something to think about very much so in this time that we live in. Moral busybodies who don't know what they're doing, and some of them do, and they're making a killing off of extracting resources and consolidating markets for their friends. And it's sad. And we have to repent of this. We cannot allow this stuff to continue. This is a wicked, wicked thing to do to people, to destroy people's lives and throw crumbs printed out of thin air that won't have any value when our savings catch up with the reality of the new money put into the economy. We have to reject this. We have to reject this false god of the state. We have to return to loving our neighbors as ourselves. I'm David Gronowski. Email me hello@aneighborschoice.com to stay in touch. But for now, Godspeed.